Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mentor Nation. I am really excited today because this is my very first solo episode, and I'm excited to share some things that I hope will add value to your life or maybe just give you a whole new perspective. You know, it's crazy because as a podcast host, I feel that it's my responsibility to not only bring the best guests possible, and also to do the best interviews possible, also to build a real relationship with all of you guys. And I know that the key to building a relationship is honesty, transparency, and most importantly, something that I'm really trying to get better at, which is vulnerability. And so that's why I wanted to go ahead and release today's episode. I originally intended to wait until after season 1 to do it, but after seeing the progress of the podcast, I really just had something on my mind and on my heart that I wanted to share with you guys. So today, I want to share a little bit about my journey in hopes that I can accomplish 2 things. Number 1, I want you to get to know me better. And number 2, I want you to understand why you need a mentor in your life right now. I'm not going to go into my whole life story, but I am going to lead it up to where I found my first mentor and how and why things changed so quickly for me after that. And then this is so important because I had a lot of chaos in my life until I had someone help me understand principles and how to use them to guide my decisions and my daily actions. So I want to get right into my story. So I grew up in a small town outside of Nashville called Antioch, Tennessee. And if you're from Nashville or anywhere near, you know that is a very poor suburb. They've rebuilt literally all of Nashville, but Antioch is still one of the biggest crap holes in Tennessee, in my personal opinion. And my parents were divorced. We never had much, but I never really knew that I was poor until I became unbelievably embarrassed in grade school. You know, we were on the welfare program, and one of the parts of that program was the free lunch program in school. And it was the most embarrassing thing, and I don't even know why they did it back in the day, and I hope they don't do it today. But everyone in school knew you were the poor kid at the beginning of every month because those of you that were on the free lunch program, you had to go up and get your lunch tickets and they would hand it to you, and everybody knew who the poor kids were, the ones that couldn't afford to have lunch. And I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. It bothered me. And it was the first time that I was really embarrassed about my situation. But the good thing is that it was the first time that I can recall ever really being motivated to want to be successful, to want to make a lot of money. And so as I got older, at the age of 17, I realized that my parents did not have money. I had no direction. I did not know what I was wanting to do with my life. I was really late when it came to applying for scholarships and anything, and I never bothered to do it because I still didn't even know what I wanted to go to college for. And even if I did know, I knew my parents couldn't support me, and so I ended up joining the military at the age of 17. I joined the U.S. Navy, and because I was a really good test taker, I ended up getting accepted into the nuclear power program. And so for 6 years, I was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, which is the furthest from what I wanted to do with my life. It was something like I have really bad ADHD. And for somebody that can't pay attention for more than 3 seconds, nuclear engineering was just extremely difficult. But I was very good at memorization and cramming, and so I was able to get through it. But it was in that journey of making my own money, paying my own bills, even though it wasn't a lot, that fueled my later motivation. And, you know, throughout the 6 years in the Navy, I had read different books, but the biggest thing that I love about that time was the ability to see the world, to see how other people lived in other countries and in different places. But really, the biggest thing that I learned was just that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, I had no idea what kind of an entrepreneur. I had read all kinds of books on everything while I was in the military, stocks and real estate, this and that. In 2005, I got out of the Navy and I had a little bit of money saved. I think I had like $10,000, and I moved back to Nashville. And I was even more confused than when I went into the military, but I was determined to figure out what I wanted to do. And at least I knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I end up in Nashville, and I had some ideas that I floated around with. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about doing was buying some Red Bull machines and putting them on college campuses with the money that I'd saved. I also spent a few $100s, and me and my brother went to bartending school. I thought that might be pretty cool just in the meantime. But what ended up happening was about a month later, I got a job selling health insurance, and it was the worst 2 weeks of my entire life. Cold calling all day. The people that wanted it didn't qualify. The people that didn't even want it. And I'll never forget the day that my entire life changed. You know, one day a lead came in, and my boss came to me and he said, "John, I want you to drive out. He's interested in a policy. I want you to go sell him one." And I was like, okay. So I got in my car. I drove about 50 miles to the middle of nowhere outside of Nashville. And I'll never forget, I went in to this driveway, and there was this huge home. I mean, this literally 12,000 square foot home on hundreds of acres. And I just remember thinking to myself, holy crap, like what the hell does this guy or girl do for a living? And I knocked on the door, he answered, and it was this older guy. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm here to sell him a policy, but I don't even care about health insurance. I'm more interested in just finding out what he does for a living. And that's exactly what I did. I think literally we spoke a few minutes about health insurance, and I got the policy, by the way. But I spent a majority of that time just asking him questions. And I was just like, what do you do? And he said to me, "I'm a storm chaser." And I was like, "What? Like you chase tornadoes?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "Listen, a storm chaser is whenever a hailstorm or a hurricane hits a city," he said, "I'll go to that city and I'll either start a small roofing company or I'll buy one. And I'll just stay in that city for 6 months to a year, and I'll do roofs. I'll hire some salespeople, and I'll make, $1 or $2 million in a year. I'll come home, I'll day trade stocks, and I'll just wait for the next storm." And you would have to have seen my face, but I was mesmerized. I just couldn't believe that he had made that much money just doing that. And 2 weeks after that meeting, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. I called him and I asked him, I was like, hey, is this the kind of storm that, you can make a lot of money with? And at that time he was retired. He was in his 60s, but he said to me, yes. He was like, "Listen, if you want to go down there, I'll get you set up. I'll have a bunch of friends that are still doing it. They're probably down there. You can start off as a salesman, just knocking on doors, selling roofs. You'll make a ton of money because this storm was a big one, but you can learn the ropes and then you can go off and do your own thing because it's not that hard." And that was all that I needed to hear. I was 23 years old. My brother was 19 years old. We packed up our bags. I got in this little Mazda truck, and we drove down to New Orleans. Actually, we started in Mobile, Alabama, because we couldn't get into New Orleans just yet. But we worked our way very quickly to New Orleans. And it was just such a crazy experience. Our first month, I remember it like it was yesterday. We get down there, we know nothing. They spend a day teaching us how to measure and give a roofing estimate. And every home in all of these cities had tarps on them. So like everybody needed a roof. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen. And I went into this neighborhood, and me and my brother, we knocked on this first door. I was super nervous. I had never sold anything in my entire life. And I just remember her answering the door, and I was super nervous, and I'm like, "Hey, we're doing roofing estimates in the air." And she's like, "Oh my God, thank God you're here. I've been calling roofers for 2 weeks. I can't get anyone to come. Like, I need a roof like yesterday." And I got so excited. I went, I measured the roof, gave her an estimate, and she's like, "Where do I sign?" And she ended up referring me to all of her neighbors. So I didn't even have to knock on any of the other doors. And that 1 month, our first month being down there, me and my brother, we made about $25,000 to split. So we each made about $12,000, which was more money than I had ever made in my entire life. And I was hooked. And in that month, I learned something really crazy. I learned that the owner of the company wasn't doing anything really crazy. He was just having me go give the estimate. He took my piece of paper, ordered the materials from Lowe's or Home Depot. Then he had a crew come out and do the roof. He didn't even do any of the roofing himself, and then he collected a check. And I learned very quickly what I needed to do. Me and my brother, we ended up starting our very first company, at the age of 23. We called it General Reconstruction and Consulting in New Orleans. And we made a lot of money. And the opportunity, unfortunately, didn't last long, because when you have that much opportunity and even two young kids that don't know anything can make really good money, everybody catches on. And so we only had about 8 to 12 months of opportunity, but we made a fortune. And when I say fortune, I mean several $100,000, but in a very short window of time. And obviously I wasn't very smart with money at that time, so I helped a lot of people. I gave a lot of it away. I blew it on really stupid things. But when the opportunity dried up there, I was looking for what was next. I took my best friend, he was just getting out of the Navy, and I called him up and I'm like, hey man, why don't we take a trip to Europe for a few weeks and just backpack through Europe, travel around, and we'll figure out our next steps. I'm looking for what I want to do. You're just getting out of the military. And so that's what we did. We booked plane tickets. We went to Europe, and it was in Amsterdam that I think we realized what we wanted to do next. We were walking around these different neighborhoods, and we saw all these really cool coffee shops. Now, yes, the coffee shops in Amsterdam serve more than just coffee, but that's not what we were thinking about. We just saw the community. We would walk into these coffee shops and there would be this amazing cafe with a bunch of friends and people that knew each other. And a lot of these families, they would live upstairs in the second floor. And we just thought that was so cool. Having a business and community and friends and people get together, it was just such a really cool environment. And when we were in the Navy, we were both stationed in Seattle, which just had a really great coffee culture anyway. And so we wanted to bring that culture, and we were trying to figure out, well, where should we open this? Where should we do it? And we ultimately decided to do it in Las Vegas, and that's what we did. I packed up my stuff in New Orleans. He packed up his stuff in Seattle. We ended up moving to Las Vegas, knowing absolutely nobody. I had some money put away from, the construction company, and we set off to open up a restaurant, and that's what we did. Within 6 months, we opened up an awesome coffee shop called Rejuvenate Coffee Lounge. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the details. Long story short, it was a disaster. We opened it at the wrong time. We opened it in late 2007, right before the big recession. And we lost everything. Everything that I had made in construction. We borrowed a whole bunch of money, well over $150,000. We lost other people's money. I got myself into a massive amount of debt. And, through living in Vegas, I ended up getting married. I had my first daughter, and it was a really, really scary situation. I found myself in 2009. It was 2009, and at that time I was 27 years old, and I was in the worst situation of my entire life. I was in over $100,000 in debt. I was married at that time. My wife was Canadian, so she wasn't a citizen, so she couldn't work or help out or make money or get a job. I had no family, no friends. I'm from Nashville, and we're living in Las Vegas, and nobody was hiring. It was so bad in Las Vegas. Everybody was losing money, and it was such a scary thing because we were still going into the restaurant every day just to make money to pay a little bit back to people. But we were still bleeding money. We weren't making anything for ourselves. And so I was scrambling. I ended up having to get this really crappy job promoting a strip club, trying to get guys into strip clubs in Las Vegas. And the only reason I got that job was because I needed something that I could do at night after I had gotten off working at the restaurant 12, 14 hours that day. I'd go into the coffee shop at 5 in the morning. I would get off at 9 p.m. I would go straight down to the strip of Las Vegas, and I would start promoting strip clubs until the middle of the night. And then I would do it all over again. And I barely made any money doing that. But, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. And at that point, one of my customers actually introduced me into the network marketing industry. And, I had never heard of the industry. I didn't know anything about it. She was successful, but really there was two things that attracted me at that time to the industry. The first one was she was doing really well in spite of the worst recession on the planet. So that obviously piqued my interest. I'm like, well, what business are you doing that you're not getting crushed in this economy when everybody's getting crushed in this economy? And number two, it was really interesting because I was bit by the entrepreneur bug. Like, I wanted to stay an entrepreneur. I didn't want to have to get a job and work for somebody else. Like, I had had a taste of success. And for those of you listening, that when you have a taste of it, it's so hard to go back. And so I was desperately looking for anything that I could do to where I could just stay an entrepreneur. I could just stay making my own money and determine my own worth. And I saw this as a way to do it. And so I ended up getting involved in the network marketing industry in 2008, late 2008, I believe is what it was. And it was so bad. I literally sucked so bad at that industry. I was so bad. Let me give you perspective. I was so bad that for 2 years of actually working it part-time, but really working it and trying, I made $100. Not $100 a week, not $100 a month. I made $100 total in 2 years of being in the industry. And, people used to always ask me, they're like, why didn't you quit? And honestly, it's just the competitiveness in me, I think. I've always believed that if somebody else can do something and they're no better than me, then I can do it. I might have to learn some things. I might have to go through some things, but if they can do it and they don't have any special circumstance or leg up, then I can do it too. And I think that's what kept me in the industry those 2 years of making no money. Throughout that entire time, I had to do all kinds of crazy odd jobs to make money to support the family. I ended up having a second daughter, which was totally unplanned, which just even added more financial burden onto the household. And, long story short, we ended up closing the restaurant. I ended up moving back to Nashville, and, our focus was just to rebuild our life. And this is where things started to get really, really interesting because I was super, super miserable when I moved back to Nashville. I tried to get a job, and the only thing I found was this stupid job on Craigslist that was for a ballroom dance teacher. And they specifically would hire people that had zero experience because they didn't want dancers because they had bad habits and other techniques that they'd have to untrain and then retrain you. And so they were looking for people that didn't know anything. And that was me. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was so embarrassing because I'm here teaching students ballroom dancing and I'm only like one step ahead of them. Like, that's how bad it was. And they knew I didn't know what I was doing. And it paid so bad. I think it was like $600 every 2 weeks. And so it was barely enough to scrape by. I'm doing my network marketing business 2 years, making no money. And then I had a little bit of a breakthrough just through desperation. I got my network marketing business to a point where I was making about $2,000 a month. And it still wasn't enough. I still was getting into more debt. It wasn't enough to support a family of 4. And I got into what I think is the lowest moment of my entire life. It was the point where I had to make a decision to either keep going or completely quit. We had nobody that we could borrow any money from. We had maxed out every credit card. We were almost homeless. And I was in the scariest place that I'd ever been in my entire life. And I was in this convention for that company. I flew out to LA, which I don't even know how I got the plane ticket. I think it was cheap at that moment, but I went to the convention. I was inspired, but I was just so down and out. And I remember being at the airport in Los Angeles. and I had a layover for about 2 hours, and there was this guy that sat down next to me. And it was such an interesting moment in my entire life. It's crazy to even think about that moment. But this man sat next to me and we just struck up a conversation randomly. I don't know who started the conversation, him or me. After chatting with him for about 5 minutes, I just got this feeling that he was really successful, just the way that he talked and carried himself. And it turned out that he had made millions and millions and millions of dollars in business, made his first million at the age of 19. It was just insane. But I just remember in that moment, just for the first time in a long time, feeling a little bit of hope, especially when I found out that he was from Nashville. And in that moment, I made the decision deep down inside of me that no matter what, I have got to find a way to get this person to mentor me. I have no other options. I have no other avenues. There's something not clicking. There's something still holding me back. There's something that I'm missing that is keeping me where I'm at. And I know how to make money. I have made money before. It's just something is mentally blocking me and I need to have a breakthrough. And so we exchanged numbers and I was like, I'm going to get this guy to mentor me. I don't care what I have to do. And he had a really interesting name. His name was Virgil. And I'd never met anybody named Virgil before, so I never forgot it. I get back to Nashville and I'm thinking like, well, you know what? I'm going to go meet him. I'm going to get him to mentor me. 3 months I call him and he doesn't answer. I leave voicemails. I text him and not creepy. I'm not trying to be overbearing, but once a week, I'm just checking in. I'm saying, hey, how's it going? Listen, hope we can get together at some point. I'd love to buy you lunch. And finally, after 3 months of persistence, he messaged me back and he's like, you know what? Come over to my place. I'll buy you lunch. Let's have a conversation. And that changed my entire life. I went over to his home. I was so nervous. I was still so desperate and poor. And I remember sitting there talking to him. He had this beautiful home in the middle of nowhere, but it was on this private lake. And it was literally like a Neverland Ranch, like Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. It was like a theme park. It was really interesting property outside of Nashville. And I was just blown away. I was so mesmerized. I'd never had a mentor in my life. I'd never had anyone successful guiding me. This was the first time I'd ever had someone sitting down that I had the opportunity to ask questions and I had the opportunity to pick their brain. And I didn't even know what to ask. What do you even say at that point, right? Like, hey, you're super rich. I'm super broke. What are the secrets to life? Like, these are the things that you want to say, but I'm trying to keep my composure. And, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to figure out a way to have this person in my life long term, somebody that I can lean on, somebody that I can ask questions to. And so after meeting him, and it was such a great conversation, he asked me a lot of questions and he didn't give me a lot of advice in that meeting, but he spent a lot of time listening. And toward the end, I'm just scared to death because I'm like, okay, how do I get this person to meet me again? How do I get this person to mentor me? And I did not know what else to say. And so at the very end, it just came out. I was just like, Virgil, I need you to mentor me. Like, what do I have to do? Like, what do I need to do? I don't care what you need me to do, what you tell me to do. Like, what will it take to get you to meet with me more often and help me, just become successful? And this is what he said to me. He's like, you want me to mentor you? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, this is what I want you to do. If you do this, I'll mentor you. And I was like, okay. He's like, I want you to read 5 books. And I want you to read these 5 books. And I want you, after every single chapter, I want you to do a handwritten book report. I want you to talk about in that book report, I want you to talk about the major takeaways and 3 things that you can implement right away. And he gave me the books. It was Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man in Babylon, The Richest Man Who Ever Lived, Launching a Leadership Revolution, and Secrets of the Vine. He gave me those 5 books and he's like, you do that, I'll mentor you. And man, I spent the next 3 weeks just doing just that. I sent him progress updates, and after I think 3 to 4 weeks, I met back with him and I turned it all in. All these handwritten book reports. I literally spent hours a day doing it. And it was a really interesting conversation after that. Like, his entire tone changed. And this was a huge breakthrough for me. He said to me, he said, John, how many people ask me to mentor them? And I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, thousands. And he's like, every time someone asks me to mentor them, I give them the same task. These 5 books, handwritten book report, 3 takeaways from every single chapter. And he's like, I can count on 2 hands the number of people that have actually done it, and you did it. And in my mind, I'm like, man, they must be really stupid, because how can not everyone in the world do that for the opportunity to be mentored by him? And later in life, I understood why most people aren't willing to do the things to be successful. But, the point is I did it, and he started to mentor me. So after I finished, he booked a session, and I went all the way to his home, and we met up again. And it was just a completely different conversation. He started asking me very different questions. He started asking me about my network marketing business. And I told him everything. I just laid it on the line. I was like, man, I suck. I've been doing this for 2.5 years. I'm making a couple grand a month. It's not enough to pay the bills. And I just don't know what I'm doing. And this is what he said to me that changed my entire life. And those of you that are listening right now, I hope that you take and you listen to what I'm telling you right now, because this was the biggest breakthrough I had in my entire life that led to everything changing for me financially and in many other different areas. But this is what he said to me. He said, John, he's like, okay, so you're doing network marketing. He's like, you've been building this for 2.5 years. You're not making a lot of money. This is my question for you. Are there people in your company making a lot of money? And I was like, yeah, there are people making millions of dollars doing this. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, absolutely. And this is what he said to me that changed my life. He said to me, he said, John, then why isn't your ass packing up your car, driving to where they are and doing whatever it takes to get them to mentor you? He's like, that's what you need to do. And in hindsight, that advice was so logical and it was so practical, but I had never thought to do that. I'd never thought to seek out mentorship, like really actively seek it out. And he was Virgil was the first person that I did that to, but he wasn't even in my business. He was just an entrepreneur. And when he gave me that advice, it was a huge breakthrough. So he asked me next, he's like, okay, so who makes the most money in your company? And I was like, well, it's these 2 brothers in North Carolina. Their names are Patrick and Michael. And he's like, okay. He's like, you need to reach out to them and you need to tell them you will do whatever. Scrub toilets, clean cars, wash their car, whatever it takes to get them to mentor you. So I reached out to the 2 brothers, and man, it was like a month and I couldn't get a hold of them. But I had an idea because I knew their number one mentee. I knew the person that they put all of their knowledge into, and it was a guy that his name was also Michael, and he was also in North Carolina. And, Patrick and Michael poured everything into this guy, Michael, and Michael came into the company, and within 6 months, he was making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I figured maybe I can't get a hold of Patrick and Michael, but maybe I can get a hold of the guy that they're mentoring, whose name is also Michael. So I reached out to Michael, and it was this long, heartfelt message of where I'm at, what I'm doing, and how I'll give anything. I'll drive all the way out there just for an hour of his time to mentor me and show me what he's doing. And he agreed. I pack up my car. I go out there for the weekend. I spend a weekend shadowing him. I see how he does what he does, how he talks, how he acts. I take notes. I record everything. I come back home and I implement everything that I saw exactly the way that I saw it. And within 90 days, I went from making $2,000 a month to over $15,000 a month. And that changed my life. And it gives me chills right now just talking about it, because I cannot imagine where my life would be today if Virgil had not told me and gave me that piece of advice to find mentors. Actively seek them out. Do whatever you have to do to get people way further along, way better than you into your circle. And that was such a huge breakthrough. I want to stop my story right here because, my whole life changed financially at that point moving forward. Today I'm 37, I'm doing just fine. But What's important, however, is that day I realized something. I realized two things, actually. The first thing that I realized is how much faster I could have gotten to where I wanted to go if I had mentors earlier in my life. And the second thing, which sucks, is I realized how much longer it would have taken me to get where I got if I had not met Virgil. It was a scary thing to think about. And that thought, it sent a chill down my spine. And that is what led to the inspiration to teach people the value and the strategies of finding world-class mentors. I can't help but think how many people are out there, and even how many of you that are listening to this right now, that you have work ethic, you have the passion, you have the desire, you have the heart, but maybe you are like I was, and you just don't have someone there to guide you or bring out the best in you. And what's even crazier is if you just think about the amount of years that you can shave off of your journey by having great mentors. We live in such a great period of time right now to make a drastic change quickly in your life. Like, I don't believe all changes happen quickly, but you can change your whole life in a short period of time. And I know that sometimes it goes against the grain of how people think, because you read all these books that show you how to save for retirement and put a little bit of money away. And there's the Dave Ramsey plan, pay off your debts. And I get it. Slow and steady can win the race. And the habit of delayed gratification is so important to learn, especially right now. But one of the problems I see with many of these books is that it leads so many people into thinking too small and not believing that you can change your life. You can make a radical shift in a short period of time. Like, I truly believe that you can change your whole life in 1 year if you wanted to. And the secret to doing that is just changing your circle. It's so crazy how many more opportunities came into my life when I started to actively focus on changing my circle and actively focus on surrounding myself with people that I wanted to be like. Because here's the reality, guys. So many of us spend all of our time with the people that are naturally around us based on our work, based on where we live, and based on the friends that we grew up with. But you wouldn't believe what could happen to you if one of your top priorities, if you just understood the value of making one of your top priorities, just actively seeking out people operating at higher levels than you and getting to know them. This has been by far the highest return on effort that I have ever seen. And this concept that I'm sharing with you right now, it means so much to me that I started this podcast, and I even called it Mentor Nation. I also just finished writing a book, which I'm really excited to tell you guys about, but I just finished writing the book and I've been working on it for almost a year now. And it's going through its edits, and it's going to be a little while before I release the book, but I know deep down that people need it. People everywhere need it. It is everything I know, everything I've learned, everything I've applied about how to find world-class mentors. And I mean, it's the handbook for it. From start to finish, this book will show you how to accomplish any goal in a fraction of the time by seeking out the best mentors to help you. It will show you where to find them, exactly how to reach out. I even put a bunch of my exact emails, a bunch of my messages, everything I said to find all of the mentors that I have now. I put all of those in the book. And, it even covers how to get any mentor to want to mentor you, how to develop the relationship with them long term, and how to totally change your circle for life. Because I believe that the key steps to changing your life are very, very, very simple. Number one, you need to get clear on what you want. Number two, you need to set the right goals. Number three, develop a plan. Number four, find a mentor. Number five, take massive action. And number six, have accountability in place for consistency. You do that, crazy things will happen in a very short period of time. So the moral of this episode is that you need to make finding mentors and changing your circle a top priority. 2020 is just around the corner. And if you are the type of person that sets goals, you need to make this one of your first and most important goals. And I want to end with a story. And this story is something that I read years ago that I've never forgotten because it's just so powerful. And the lesson here is so powerful. And it's about a gentleman by the name of Li Ka-shing. Now, a lot of you may not know who this is, but at one time, Li Ka-shing was the wealthiest person in China with a net worth of almost $40 billion. Now, I think he's number 2 or 3 now because Jack Ma from Alibaba and there's a couple others, but he's still top 3. He's still worth over $30 billion. But I read this article where he was doing an interview, and the person interviewing him asked him a really cool question that I thought was really neat. And this is what he said. He said, okay, I have a question for you. You're worth almost $40 billion right now, but I want to ask you, if you had to start all over, if you literally had to go back in time, you had none of your money, none of your connections, none of your resources, nothing. The only thing you could take back with you is just the knowledge, the lessons that you've learned and nothing else. What would be the most important thing that you think would help you get back to where you are today? And this is what he said, and I'm going to quote it and I'm reading it right now. This is what he said. Take people to lunch or dinner every month and always foot the bill. Super fancy dinners are not required, but you must be selective of who you invite. Find people with more experience and bigger dreams than you. Choose people you can learn from, and allot a budget to do this twice every month with no exceptions. In 1 year of doing this, you'll have a big enough network that can generate tremendous value for you in terms of connections, support, knowledge, and opportunities. This is the advice that someone worth $40 billion who's completely self-made, who grew up super poor, gave if he had to go back in time and start all over. And I wanted to share that with you because I think some of you need to hear that. I hope that helped you. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed my first solo episode. I must admit, I was a little nervous talking about some of those things, just going back and thinking about those things. Some of them really hit home because it wasn't too long ago that I actually went through much of that. And I'm sure I left out some of the timeline, but the point of this episode is that you need to go out and you need to get a mentor in your life. And to be perfectly honest, it's not so much that you need one mentor as it is that you need to make a real and honest effort to change your circle and the people that you are spending most of your time with. I cannot stress this enough, how fast my life and how fast the people that I've interviewed, their life has changed when they started just getting around people that thought at a much higher level, that were accomplishing much bigger things. You know, that's the fastest way to 10x your thinking. And every single day, success becomes more and more about who you know. And it is a common saying from some of the most successful people in the world that your network is your net worth. So if you have questions about how to find mentors, what to say, what type of mentor to find, feel free to connect with me on Instagram. Ask me any questions that you have. I am very responsive on Instagram right now at Mentor Nation Podcast. Again, I'm on Instagram at Mentor Nation Podcast. I also have a book coming out pretty soon that shares everything that I've learned about how to find incredible mentors, develop relationships with them, and I'll share more about that as we get closer to the release. For now, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Give us a great review and just share with some people that you think would get value. Guys, word of mouth is the most powerful form of advertising in the world, and your recommendation means the world to us. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week with another incredible episode.